In a deep, dark forest, where the trees towered high and the shadows danced mysteriously, there lived a little mouse named Max. Max was no bigger than a walnut, with soft brown fur and bright, curious eyes. Despite his tiny size, Max had a heart as big as the whole forest. Now, Max's home was nestled beneath the roots of a grand oak tree, and all the animals in the forest knew him well. He was always there to lend a paw, whether it was helping a squirrel gather nuts or guiding a lost bird back to its nest. Everyone loved Max because, even though he was small, he was brave and kind. But one day, trouble came to the forest. A sneaky fox, with fiery red fur and sharp, cunning eyes, began to prowl near the edge of the trees. The fox was known far and wide for his tricks, and he loved nothing more than causing mischief. The animals of the forest were terrified. None of them wanted to be the fox's next meal. The deer, the rabbits, and even the wise old owl gathered together in a secret meeting deep within the forest. "What shall we do?" they whispered in fear. "The fox is too clever, and we are too scared to stand up to him." Max listened quietly from the edge of the gathering, his tiny heart pounding. He knew he had to do something. After all, the forest was his home too, and he couldn't bear to see his friends so frightened. With a deep breath, Max stepped forward. "I'll go," he squeaked, his voice small but determined. The animals gasped. "But Max, you're just a little mouse," said the rabbit, his nose twitching with worry. "How can you possibly stand up to the fox?" Max smiled bravely. "I may be small, but I've got something the fox doesn't have. I've got my wits." The animals were unsure, but they knew Max was right about one thing. He was the cleverest of them all. So, with a mixture of hope and worry, they wished Max luck and watched as he scampered off toward the edge of the forest. Max knew he needed a plan, a clever one. He thought and thought as he ran through the underbrush, his tiny paws barely making a sound. Finally, an idea sparked in his mind, and he hurried to put it into action. He gathered some leaves, twigs, and a few shiny pebbles and set to work. By the time the sun began to set, Max had crafted something that looked very much like a trap, an obvious one, too, that any animal would notice. But that was all part of Max's plan. As the moon rose high in the sky, Max hid behind a bush and waited. Sure enough, soon the fox came slinking through the trees, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. He spotted the trap and chuckled to himself. These silly forest creatures think they can outsmart me with such a simple trap. They must think I'm a fool. The fox, being as clever as he was, carefully stepped around the trap, laughing all the while. But what he didn't know was that Max had set up another, much sneakier trap, a hole covered with leaves and twigs, just a few steps ahead. As the fox strutted forward, confident he had outwitted the animals, he suddenly yelped in surprise as the ground gave way beneath him. Down he tumbled into the hole, his pride bruised and his tail covered in dirt. Max scurried up to the edge of the hole and looked down at the fox. "You might be bigger, Mr. Fox, but you should never underestimate someone just because they're small," Max said, his voice filled with courage. The fox, now thoroughly embarrassed and stuck in the hole, realized he had been outsmarted by the very creature he thought was too small to matter. He grumbled and growled, but there was no getting out without help.